I'm going on record to tell you guys we're going to shock the country.
You know, some years we're coming into as late as today, and we're looking at an uncommitted logo next to the number one player in the class. Well, that hasn't been the case here. And then maybe, guys, there are other years where they're committed, but are they going to stick? This has just never been an issue with Travis Hunter, the number one player in the country there, out of Collins Hill, Sewanee, Georgia.
The beautiful thing about the guys that are sitting in the room in Tallahassee, there's going to be a fight, offense, defense, and even the special teams coach on who gets Travis Hunter.
People always want to know, is anything happening with guys like Travis Hunter or Walter Nolan? I said, is there any chance Travis Hunter flips? And the source said, hell no.
You know, every now and then there was a whisper here, whisper there, and Travis Hunter always closed it down. So we come into signing day. There's not really a debate about where he's going to sign. We understand he is a Florida State Seminole.
I'm telling you right now, you've heard it from me. We're going to shock the country.
He's got something big over there, Steve. What's happening?
Travis Hunter has wiped all his stuff from Instagram, being a Florida State commit, and then a source on the college level in the state of Georgia is predicting that Jackson State and Deion Sanders is in a good position to land Travis Hunter, so stay tuned.
Hold on. So I don't know that I've ever honestly said this before, but I actually did get chills when he said it. It never happened on air.
Well, I got the text before, and I was like, I replied to Holy, I can't say the other thing to our guy Bud Elliott in our group chat, this would be insane.
This, in terms of if he's able to pull this off, is something we've never seen.
The opportunity that this could provide Jackson State to get the number one player in the country is game changing.
I was in my mind. Been checking me out, Mom. Don't be that happy.
This has the entire recruiting world turned upside down.
I think this is the biggest story in the recruiting world probably ever, right? I mean, let's call it what it is. This is huge. This is the biggest flip ever.
What Deion has done is created the ultimate buzz.
Well, it is the biggest recruiting news I've ever seen on signing day, and honestly, it's awesome.
All right, so that was then, this is now. Hey, what hasn't changed is Travis Hunter is still a stud. He's still the number one overall ranked player per the 24/7 Sports individual player rankings. There you see the player profile, and we've showed this a lot. And you've got Jackson State now as his home. What a day that was. And there were a lot of people here in a lot of different places from a lot of different angles watching that, just as you guys were at home. And to relive that for just a second, we're bringing a whole lot of them in. But look, you could listen to me and Wiltfong and Ivans talk all day long. Bryant McFadden, I want to start with you because you were actually there. I see that smile. You were in Tallahassee. You turned from a reporter essentially into an on-the-ground correspondent that day. What was it like when that news started to proliferate there around the Florida State campus?
It was shocking. It was shocking. I flew into Tallahassee early that day and went straight to the football facilities and spoke with Coach Norvell and some of the other coaches. And, of course, Travis Hunter was the big fish for their recruiting class. They actually got the recruiting idea from Travis Hunter about how they wanted to present the signees to the university. Platinum signing class is what Travis came up with. And things started to shift a little bit. I guess the coaches were reaching out to him. He wasn't responding. And if you know anything about recruiting, anytime you reach out to a player and that player don't respond, something is up. And while I'm sitting in the office, you know, I'm checking you guys out as well. You did a hell of a job, you know, with all the information you guys provided. And I remember seeing Steve, like, in the background, like the ultimate insider, looking at his phone and instantly becoming shocked, nervous. It was just like Steve was like, oh, shoot, what's going on? And while Steve is giving the information that he's receiving, I'm sitting in the office and now I'm hearing coaches say, oh, something is not up with Travis. Something is not right with Travis. And then we started hearing Jackson State, Jackson State, Jackson State. And then before you know it, it became official. And that was tough for Florida State because he was a guy that was committed to the university for almost 2 years. I had him on my podcast and he was just talking about the love for Florida State, always wanted to play for the Garnet and Gold. And then the day of signing day, early signing day, he flipped it changed the landscape of college football. And because of that, now you kind of got to expect the unexpected when it comes to these prospects and what they say when it comes to commitments and things like that.
Yeah, unprecedented, sort of this hyperbolic world or word that's thrown around a lot in our world on this day, but that really fit the description perfectly. 24/7 Sports' Carl Reed joins us as well. Carl, you are on the high school coaching side of the fence, and I was really curious from your vantage point when you watched all that go down that day, what were your initial reactions?
Well, I think I was in shock, probably like everybody else in the country initially. But when you really start to sit back and evaluate it, not only is it Deion Sanders, and when you talk about Hunter being committed to Florida State as long as he was, it would be safe to say that the player he probably emulated his game behind is Deion Sanders, who's one of the greatest Seminoles of all time, if not the greatest, playing the same position that he plays. Deion also has great relationships with a lot of kids because he spent years being a youth and a high school coach. And he was a big part of the Under Armour All-American game. So he's built incredible relationships with kids. So it's not a surprise to me that kids would want to play for Deion, and the exposure that they're getting with the media that follows them around is unprecedented. And so kids like Hunter, I think, is just the tip of the iceberg. He's going to get a lot more big-time prospects over the course of his career there to continue to look at Jackson State as a real option.
I want to go back to Bryant and Carl, both of you guys, to get your respective answers on this. When that happened, there was the initial shock, and then once the shock wore off and people recovered and picked up their phone, one of the first things everyone wanted to talk about is, okay, is this an isolated deal, or how big an impact is this going to be? Is this just something I'm going to get used to now on the HBCU front? So Bryant first, and then Carl, I'll get your answer. Just the overall bigger picture impact of this, what does it really mean?
It's huge because looking at what happened, in December, no one thought that could be a possibility for the number one player in the country, dynamic player, to basically say no to a Power 5 school and go to a HBCU school. That's almost unreal. And I can think back to my time when I was a prospect, right? I had a few coaches. Just one school from the HBCU. It was FAMU. He came to my high school. He told my coach, you know what? I know I probably don't have a chance to get McFadden, but I just want to see him. I just want to talk to him. And he came in, he talked to me a little bit. I'm like, yo, FAMU, okay, it's cool, but it's no cool. Thanks, but no thanks. But seeing what Deion Sanders has been able to do, it's about who they have coaching them. That's the thing. Deion Sanders is a guy that we all know, we all respect, we all want to be like to some degree, from the swag, the way he dominates, his greatness. And when he comes and talks to you, and he is the ultimate car salesman. I mean, he can sell water to a whale. Let's keep it real. When he talks to you, he starts saying some good things to you, not to mention his the impact that he has made, all the connections he's made. I was surprised, but then I wasn't surprised. But the biggest surprise for me was the school he took Travis Hunter from. That was the ultimate surprise. And that's the thing that a lot of people in Tallahassee were so upset about, was like, yo, Deion, this is what you're going to do to your school that, you created your identity at, football identity. So I don't expect for this to continue to happen because all HBCU schools don't have the luxury of having Deion Sanders as their head coach.
Carl, same question to you right quick.
Well, I think that Deion obviously gives them an advantage that the other HBCUs don't have. So I agree with Brian on that from a standpoint of, do you have Deion Sanders? Deion Sanders is able to provide kids things that everybody else doesn't have. But what it does do is it gives kids the opportunity to say, this is a very viable option for us. If we go to a HBCU, we can get some exposure, because when Jackson State is playing opponents on ESPN, they're going to be playing against other HBCUs. There's long been conversations throughout the football circles of, what if these kids went to HBCUs like they used to go to back in the day when guys were going to Grambling and FAMU and Southern? Could you overtake those teams? But what I think a more realistic vantage point is, you have to look at the fact that the HBCUs are FCS schools. So while people want to compare them to Alabama and Georgia, they really have to try to close the gap between North Dakota State, who dominates the level of the FCS schools, at that level. You want to close the gap between North Dakota State. And I think Jackson State is in a position to do that if they can continue to recruit at a high level. But HBCUs across the board have to take advantage of the exposure that they're getting and use those to build their programs, because there's still only 63 scholarships at that level. And so Deion can't take all the players. If I was an HBCU coach right now, I'd be trying to jump on board and show kids that these are real options.
Here you see the class notes right now for the Jackson State program. They're the 119th ranked class, but 2 prospects in the top 55. Again, when we're talking Bama and Georgia, no, that's not noteworthy, but this is not Bama, Georgia. As Carl Reed just pointed out, it's not even the same level of football. Overall rankings there, number 79. I wanted to bring back this conversation and bring in Chris Singletary, because Chris, right now, understandably so, a lot of focus is going to be on Travis Hunter, but if you zoom it out just a little bit and you look at the class, and we're not talking that much about the Jackson State class, it takes that. This is not tennis, not an individual sport. So to have the impact that we're talking about them potentially having, you got to have a team to do it. What kind of team is Deion Sanders building?
He's building a great team. I was fortunate enough to see a guy by the name of Kevin Coleman, who's going there out of the St. Louis area. And when you see Kevin Coleman, I had a chance to watch him at the Polynesian Bowl. He's a big-time playmaker. He's a guy that can play in the slot. He can play on the perimeter on the outside. He's a guy that runs really, really crisp routes and also has some return ability. And he's a guy that turned down a lot of the big Power 5 schools to attend Jackson State. I think when you also look at that and then look at how they've made the transition with guys out of the portal, and you say, okay, now next year they get a full cycle of guys that they're going to recruit in 23 who are going to resonate with what Kevin Coleman and what Travis Hunter did, and now they're going to go in spring recruiting. The conversation is going to be a lot different. They're going to have more time to develop those relationships and be able to attract some of these guys that they feel are guys that they want to be a part of the Jackson State Tiger program.
It's also interesting, you know, when you talk about the guys, like you just said, that have Power 5 offers, but also offers from the next level. And Carl Reed, I wanted to bring you back in because sometimes you're in a position as a high school coach where you're counseling guys, and they may come to you and say, Coach, I've got Power 5 offers, but I've also got this offer here. Is there a way that's evolved in how you would advise those guys 5 years ago versus now, or is it pretty much the same as it always has been?
Well, when you talk about even 5 years ago, Aqeel Glass, the quarterback from Alabama A&M, who's turned himself into a football prospect that's going to be drafted in the NFL here, is one of my former players, and he's a 2-time SWAC Offensive Player of the Year. And when he was coming out of high school, HBCU, Alabama A&M was the only offer that he had. And I don't think at that time, if he had anything else, he would have went to Alabama A&M. Now we fast forward to now, Antonio Doyle, who's a transfer portal guy from Texas A&M and was an Adidas All-American. He called me after the Travis Hunter announcement, and he said, get on the phone with Deion. I want to go to Jackson State. And that momentum started to come with that. So Kevin Coleman, who's another St. Louis area high school player, he started talking to Antonio. So those are real options for those guys now. These guys are having conversations. They camp together. They play 7-on-7 together. They're at these All-American Bowls together, and they are all talking about the effect that Deion has. But even from that standpoint, there are other kids. Jason Greathouse is a kid who's signing today with Grambling State University, a JUCO All-American that had other options and decided to play for Hugh Jackson, who's also being very aggressive with this. Tennessee State going out and hiring Eddie George and what their athletic director has done trying to build that program around. This is a real movement that is getting built piece by piece. And if they can continue to get the exposure and continue to get TV time, this could balloon into a very big thing.
B-Mac, there's a big difference from just general public perception in Deion Sanders doing something, because that's a name everyone knows, versus this having a more wide-ranging impact. But there are other notable names as head coaches at the HBCU level that people would recognize. They just may not know they're there. What are some other names that you have an eye on that could potentially have this kind of impact?
But right there on your graphic, you see Eddie George. He's a name that clearly, if you're a football fan, football watcher, you know who he is. The same can be said for Tyrone Whitley. You just heard about Hugh Jackson at Grambling State. These guys all have something that these players would like to get at some point, which is NFL ties. Eddie George, one of the great running backs of the National Football League, had an outstanding career at Ohio State, Tennessee. You look at Tyrone Wheatley, unbelievable career at Michigan, went on to the NFL, had a great career as well. The same can be said for Hugh Jackson. They have to be able to showcase to these kids, we have ties that can get you to the next level, regardless if you don't go to a Power 5 school. That was the biggest issues back in years past. Not being able to get the recognition, not being able to be seen, to be able to have an opportunity to get drafted. Now they're doing things a little differently. HBCU they have like their own combine where all 32 teams will be there to see them perform. Not to mention you get more TV exposure along with the likes of Deion Sanders coming to the league and Eddie George. So I do believe the momentum clearly is in HBCU's favor based on the big names they have representing some of their universities, and that's something totally different than what we saw in years past.
Steve Wiltfong, some final thoughts here, just the bigger recruiting perspective.
Well, Coach Sanders is obviously a lightning rod for media attention when he got the job at Jackson State. Jackson State was in the news a lot more, but I think from a recruiting standpoint, it went from, hey, it's awesome to get a phone call and an offer from Coach Sanders and the staff to, these guys just went 11-2. And this is a program that 5 of the 6 years before that, there were some tough seasons at Jackson State. When you look at their attendance and you compare it to FCS football, they blew away the Dakotas and the Montanas and those tradition-rich FCS programs. Jackson State had by far the best attendance in FCS football this year, over 40,000 fans. So the community has really rallied around Jackson State and has made it a special environment to play football in. So they go 11-2. Then you got guys on your staff like Dennis Thurman, who's developed some of the best defensive backs in the NFL. So it's a staff with pedigree beyond Coach Sanders. It's one thing to get in the conversation and be a hat on the table, which I think we knew Jackson State was going to be when they hired Coach Sanders. But to land these kids, I'm not so sure that these young men are signing up to play for Jackson State if they're not 11-2, and that's really just the tip of the iceberg. They played a lot of young players this year, so they're bringing back a very talented football team. Then they're infusing it with guys like Antonio Doyle and Travis Hunter, obviously, and Kevin Coleman, and so the arrow is up on Jackson State, 11-2, with a true freshman quarterback, Shedeur Sanders, coming back, an award winner on that level. I think it's the proof in the pudding, and the way they played on the field helped them, and it'll be interesting to see how the other HBCUs compete with that moving forward, and what kind of prospects they can bring in with the results and getting the community to rally around their programs in a similar fashion.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a different lens that a lot of people are viewing college football through for the first time. It's really fun to talk about.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.